Okay, so you can see my slides now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to present with you today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and I will try and leave a little bit of time for questions when I've completed. So the purpose of my session today is really just informational. I want to share with you some information about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and some of the ways that they might be used as part of primary, secondary, and post-secondary education. So welcome and thanks for having me. So a little bit about me. I am a technologist and instructional designer and currently an administrator at Cambrian College in Sudbury, Ontario. I'm also an open educational resource advocate, and that's my area of research. And I recently finished a doctoral degree in that area. And I'm very much interested and have been pursuing for the past few years the intersection of open educational resources and the Sustainable Development Goals for education. And I was very excited about this idea when I first heard about it from Cable Green, who was recently the acting director for Creative Commons, and have partnered with several colleagues to talk it through and think of the possibilities over time. Please feel welcome to connect with me. I believe slides will be shared by the conveners of the conference, and hopefully you can see my notes and slides and contact information. So I just want to situate myself in the world a little bit with you. I am in Greater Sudbury in Ontario, Canada, which is quite a long plane ride from Taipei. I'm very privileged to have visited Taipei. My husband and I honeymooned in Taiwan in 2012. So it's been a while since I've been there, but it's a lovely country with lovely people. And I just want to do something that we do here in Canada called a land acknowledgement. And this is to respect and to engage in truth and reconciliation with our First Nations Indigenous people. So I just want to say that I acknowledge that I am situated on the traditional lands of the Robinson-Huron Treaty and express my gratitude to the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabe ancestors of this land and the Anishinaabe people for their partnership. Together, we engage in the processes of truth and reconciliation as part of respecting, honoring, and sustaining the land and ourselves. So that's a very common thing you might hear from Canadians these days as part of this process of truth and reconciliation. So the purpose of my talk and what I really get excited about are the Sustainable Development Goals. And if these are new for you and you haven't really heard of them, they're this very visually gorgeous set of goals that United Nations and all the partner nations established in 2015, and it's a 15-year plan for ways that we can achieve these goals. There are 16 goals, and the 17th is call to partnership for nations and people in nations and regions to partner together to try and achieve the goals. As you can see by their titles, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, these are what we call wicked problems in our world. So it's a global call, and there are some nations that are more privileged. There are some nations who are economically developing. And again, the idea of partnership is really critical in these Sustainable Development Goals. So the United Nations describes these goals, again, they were established in 2015 to build on the Millennium Development Goals, which went from 2000 to 2015, and tried to continue to establish some success. The goals focus on the human rights of all, gender equality, and the empowerment of all women and girls as a very predominant focus. And they're talking about economic, social, and environmental sustainability and sustainable goals. The first part of the goals are focused on people. So I will share the slides, and I don't like reading text off slides very much. So I'll share the slides with you, and you can read through these descriptions for yourself. So there's people, planet, prosperity, and peace. These are fairly common calls in social justice and economic conversations. Peace is a particular area of focus for me. I'm very strongly aligned with the goal number 16 for peace. But the final part of the goals, number 17, is partnership, and that's why I'm talking with you today, to encourage you to consider learning more about the goals and to engage in partnerships as part of your open source work. I have the great privilege of being friends and knowing lots of people who work in open source, in open data, in open access, lots of librarians that I know based on the open educational resources work that I've been doing. And we continuously partner, especially through academic Twitter. So you'll find me there a lot and engaging with lots of global thinkers. But what I love about the Sustainable Development Goals is there's something there for everyone, something that interests you or resonates with you, and something in particular, if you happen to work in post-secondary education as I do, something that resonates with students and learners that really gets them excited about spending their time and energy focused on solving regional problems and global problems. So I just want to talk with you a little bit because my friend David Wiley, who's also an open educational resource advocate in the US and has spent a long time in this space, he did a little napkin exercise about homework hours. And so whether you teach, wherever you teach, even if you teach with community members, they are doing tasks related to the things you're trying to teach them, especially when they're coding and working on apps and things like that. So I did a little bit of math in my own college. So I'm a pretty small college. We offer 1, 2, and 3-year certificate and diplomas, and mostly in vocational health and sciences, very applied. And we have about 5,000 students. So if those 5,000 students were doing 2 hours per week of homework and assignment work, and that's pretty bare minimum for most post-secondary students. And there's 14 weeks in our semester, so just the fall alone, for example, that's 140,000 hours of human time on task. That is a huge amount of time that students could be working on global problems as part of authentic learning, as part of what we call real world task and experiential learning. And I know those of you who work in open source are very experiential and hands-on. And so what do you imagine that this group of students might accomplish with that much time if they were motivated and excited to begin solving these problems? So I'm going to walk you through a little bit, and I hope that I can still share my screen and that you can see this. I just want to show you a little bit about these goals that's really kind of cool and important. So again, all of the visuals, all of the details of these goals are openly shared by the United Nations. This is a huge project, global project for them, and they want people to use these materials. But if, for example, I go to goal number 5, gender equality, if I click to read more about this goal, what it takes me to is some reporting on how various nations around the world are achieving this goal. What kinds of problems are they solving? Where is their focus currently? And one of the things that I really thought was really quite amazing about the targets and indicators right now was the COVID-19 response. And so for each of the goals right at the moment, the UN is providing information on how that's going in terms of the COVID response. So I encourage you to explore this link and flip those goals around and see what's happening in the targets and indicators. And when I say targets and indicators, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit more. For this goal number 5, and for each of the goals in this set, there are targets. And some of the ones that I thought really resonated with me related to the work of COSCUP and the open source work that you're doing are 5.5, so ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in political, economic, and public life. And here I know that many in software and hardware industries have been working harder to ensure that women have more opportunities in those disciplines and fields. So this goal really references that concept. So you can use this link. And if I don't think I have a chat that I can really share links with, but we'll find a way to share these slides with you so you can have the links. And you can just Google it, SDGs. There's lots of information there, as you might imagine. So again, this was that detail that I really loved about COVID that each of the goals currently have. And this is really important information for us. Women are not only the hardest hit by this pandemic, but they are also the backbone of recovery in communities. This is really important information, especially in economically developing countries. Putting women and girls in the center of economies will fundamentally drive better and more sustainable development. So it's really one of my favorite focuses for the SDGs. And again, as I say, when I click on any one of these goals, on the flip side and a little further down the page, you'll see what they call the targets. 5B hits right to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish in open source. Enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communications technology, to promote the empowerment of women. And this is where, if you are working in your discipline, in your field, you are teaching others, striving to promote the voices of women, to encourage women to stand up and use their voices is really the most important part. There's a really great specific Canadian example of this. One of my favorite organizations, Canada Learning Code. They started out when I was starting out in Open in 2012, 2013 as Ladies Learning Code. So there's a total focus for this organization on women learning to code, but they have expanded and broadened their mandate, and now they have teens learning code and kids learning code and teachers learning code. They're currently offering all of their online workshops at no cost, which is really exciting. And so they're trying to encourage Canadian youth to take part in coding. One of the other things that if you work in post-secondary, I think is important to focus on is the idea of that homework assignment, right? Remember when I said earlier that, you know, something like 140,000 hours might be available of student time if you encourage them to take a look at these sustainable development goals. In fall 2019, I was teaching a course at the college on critical thinking, just basic critical thinking and information literacy, the kinds of things that we want students and learners to get under their belts for all kinds of disciplines and fields. And one of the assignments based on an idea from my colleague Jessica O'Reilly was to teach the students about the Sustainable Development Goals, encourage them to learn and explore these goals, and to turn that exploration into a writing assignment. So they need to learn how to write and to cite resources. And so the assignment ended up being the request for them to learn more about the SDGs, to choose an SDG that resonated with them, that they felt was important in their communities, and most of them are here in Sudbury. And then to explore partner organizations in the community that might be working on that sustainable development goal. And this was just one of the assignments. I had about 30 students, and the spectrum of engagement and motivation and writing that came from these students was really amazing to me. They were so involved and so engaged by this idea. This particular student, Andrea, wrote about her Anishinaabe community. So she's an Indigenous person. She lives on a First Nation near the college, and she is related to some rather famous what are called water walkers in their community. And so these are women whose job it is to walk their lands and to walk their nation. Some of them walk all over Canada near the water and talking about the clean water and sanitation, it turns out, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so she wrote this beautiful, wonderful piece, very moving piece about her relationship with water and with the water walkers. So again, this is just one very small example of the types of assignments that you could do with students. And I know I wasn't able to tune in or to hear the prior session, but I know Mr. Jihong was talking about the MIT apps competition. And that was focused on creating apps for global good. And I thought, well, what was missing right there was this clear connection, easy connection with the Sustainable Development Goals. Because there's this, as I say, there's this beautiful set of goals. So if you're thinking of running a hacking competition and encouraging learners and novice programmers to focus on something, the Sustainable Development Goals is a really easy win for everyone. A second example of one of the goals is decent work and economic growth, which is so relevant in this time of global pandemic. We saw the numbers in the US, excuse me, about the loss of GDP, and we'll be seeing this globally in better and worse ways, quite likely. But again, these targets, if you flip the goal around and look on the back and scroll down a little bit, you'll see these targets for each of the goals. So achieve higher levels of economic productivity through diversification, technological upgrading, and innovation, including a focus on high value added and labor intensive sectors. So here we are talking probably about AI and other ways and methods of shifting how humans work. But those humans who are possibly potentially replaced by machines will need other things to do, and solving global problems is a really great human activity. And again, promoting policies, job creation, entrepreneurship. I think this resonates quite a lot, I hope, with this community, the open source community. Entrepreneurship that is grounded in social justice in all the ways that it can be both profitable and good for society. So there's lots of conversation around that with the SDGs, in particular this one, SDG 8. Excuse me. So the heart of my presentation is really this focus on 3 calls to action. So read through the SDGs, get to know them, enjoy how beautifully designed they are, and all the lovely colors and the openness that surrounds them. So the SDGs rely very heavily on open data, transparent government. They rely very heavily on the sharing and transparency of knowledge across regions, nations, and globally. They rely on open access to research, where folks are doing research in all of the relevant disciplines and fields related to the SDGs, sharing that research as openly as possible and not hiding it behind paywalls is a really critical factor in achieving these goals. There's something called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, and the National Taiwan University is part of it, related to their program in climate change and sustainable development. And there are global colleges, universities all across the world that are part of this network. So there's a link in here, but if you just Google Sustainable Development Solutions Network, what you'll see is post-secondary students and probably high school secondary students as well, becoming very involved in connecting with each other in their own schools, connecting across their regions and across the globe in national competitions to help solve these goals and to talk about them regionally and again globally. It's a very exciting time for that kind of connection. And what's interesting about this time in terms of the pandemic is this, we have experienced here in Canada, and you probably have experienced, a very rapid shift from in-person focused education to digital and online and distance education. And one of the things that is empowered by that shift are these global connections, student to student, group to student group, across institutions, where your focus for your students, whatever discipline you are in, could be these SDGs. And so again, the third call here is to embed the work of the Sustainable Development Goals in your curriculum and training programs wherever possible. Invite learners to choose and explore these goals and determine for themselves what resonates with them. And you'll always find a surprising result. Students are so motivated based on their family and cultural experiences by one or another of the goals in particular. Help them focus on activities that help to achieve a specific target. Again, these are wicked problems. No poverty is a wicked problem to try and solve. But if students can do some small thing in their communities or in their schools, for example, we have food banks at our college right now and trying to help our community with food security in this challenging economic time. Encourage them to focus on their communities and regions and connect yourself and your learners with other global groups working on the SDGs, and that circles back to joining in on the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. This is a United Nations call to action, and my call to action today just really specifically relates to the opportunities you have when choosing tasks and assignments for learners to learn to code, for example, to learn more about web design. There are so many non-governmental organizations and not-for-profits in the world who are working on the SDGs that could use technology support to enhance and increase their messages. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. And I wanted to check in and see if you had any questions before my time was up. If not, you are always welcome to reach out to me. I'm at Jenni Hayman on Twitter. And my email address is jenny.hayman@gmail.com, which is also, I think, on my front slide for today's session. Thank you very much for your time.
So let's see if there's any questions from the audience. 大家有没有什么问题? Okay, actually, Dr. Hayman, so if we embed any of the goal in our curriculum or our project assignment, how does the students connect to other group worldwide in the same for the same topic?
So I believe this network, the Sustainable Development Goals Solutions Network, is very post-secondary oriented. So you will see, for example, University of Waterloo and several universities across Canada and colleges and universities across the whole world. So if you explore that, you'll see there are lots and lots. And each of the member organizations in SDSN has a contact person. So if you feel there's good alignment between what you are working on in your discipline and your courses with what might be worked on across at a different institution, you can try and connect with that member organization and the person, the representative, and see what you can start to do together.
So I think for individual students, the easiest way is to have online forum or any way to post questions and conduct any discussion. So is there any community or forum online for that purpose?
I'm not 100% certain of that. I've just started to become involved with our Canadian National SDSN group, and John Beale is my contact there. So I don't know if they have, for example, a listserv on Gmail or something like that where students are starting to connect with one another. I would be very surprised if they didn't have that. But again, it's a new exploration for me. I don't spend my days, I'm an administrator and I work with teaching faculty members about pedagogy technology. So I don't get to work with students as often as I would like. But I am encouraging our faculty members at Cambridge College to do this. So I will learn more as I go about those individual student connections.
Okay, that's great. So this is a remote presentation. So do you mind sharing your slides later to our volunteers?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay. Okay, we will post it to our community, and maybe people will get interested and work with you and your group. So thank you for joining us today. And let me check one more time. So is there any questions from the audience? I guess that's it. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
我们距离下一场的 presentation 还有5分钟，大家可以休息。